Hello my fiery friends, the Infernoman here with the hottest in budget deck technology. And for today's deck tech, join me once again as we continue to go through our Basically series. For those of you who are unaware, this is the series I put together that allow you to make some of the best budget decks you can make that will not require to use a single rare or mythic to build.
That is awesome!
That's right. So, without further ado, join me in the Explorer format for today's deck that I am calling Basically Deserts. But before we continue, if you do like any of the content that I do, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you watch the content. You can support me monthly for a small amount on Patreon, where I have all of my extended bonus footage posted. We also have a Redbubble spot where you can buy merch like stickers and shirts, or for free, all you can just do also is just join our growing community on Discord. Your support helps keep this channel going. All links are in the details below. Longtime viewers of the channel know how we do it. We have to talk about the stats of the deck before we dive right in. So our Basically Deserts deck today is going to be 4 colors, which is going to utilize blue, black, red, and green. We're looking at an average mana curve of about 2.8, and we'll be rocking 14 creatures, 4 instants, 7 sorceries, 10 enchantments, and 25 lands. Basically Deserts is a 4-color land-based deck that's going to be focusing on trying to get as many desert lands as possible out there. And while that may sound similar to just what we talked about previously in our 4-color decks, which is the Gates deck and also the Caves deck, what differentiates itself from those land-based strategies is this one has a little bit more of an aggro strategy to it, because we want to put out as many deserts that can ping our opponent for damage to slowly build up, of course, our value. And once we manage to close the gap with life, we can then bring out a giant creature to smash our way through victory and hopefully close out the game with one simple swipe. But you may be wondering right now, how does this even differentiate itself even on a budget among the other land-based strategies we've already talked about?
Good question.
Well, I'm glad you asked. So without further ado, let's show you exactly what I'm trying to convey with this awesome, unique deck. Starting with the creatures in the deck, we'll be going into the 1-drop slot with a Boreal Grazer. Again, we've seen this card used many times in land-based strategies. It doesn't do that much. All it just simply does is allow us to put another land onto the battlefield tapped, which is great for us because a lot of our lands, of course, come into play tapped, so we want to try to ramp out as fast as possible. It also provides a nice blocker in the early game. And then in the 3-drop slot, we'll also utilize Outcaster Greenblade here. This is actually a surprisingly powerful card that takes advantage of the deserts we will have. So let's talk about this card for just a moment. Outcaster Greenblade here is a 3-mana 1/2 human mercenary that reads, when this creature enters, you search your library for a basic land card or a desert card. Reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle. The creature will get a +1/+1 bonus for each desert we control. So as this comes out, this will already be a very powerful creature that'll put a lot of pressure on our opponent in the early part of the game. Going into the 4-drop slot, we'll have Spitfire Lock here as one of our pseudo finishers, because this has a landfall ability that reads, whenever a land we control enters, this creature will deal 1 damage to each opponent. So as we keep putting out more and more of our deserts that will ping our opponent for 1, with a Spitfire Lockout, we'll technically be able to then ping for 2 points of damage in total. And our other card that's going to be only 2 copies of in the main deck will be Spinewood Armadillo here. So this is a 6-mana 7/7, and it's actually an armadillo creature that has reach and ward 3, so it has nicely built protection into it if we utilize it as an actual creature. Otherwise, we can use it as pseudo ramp. For 2 mana, its ability allows us to discard it and then search our library for a basic land card or a desert card. Reveal it and then you put it into your hand and then you shuffle. Also on top of that, you'll gain 3 life, which is also great for stabilizing at any point in the game. Continuing on into the non-creature spells to support our game plan here, we'll utilize Desert Stew and Unquenchable Thirst as our spot removal. Desert Stew is actually going to be hard removal, and it gives one of our opponent's creatures -2/-2 until end of turn. However, it'll get an additional -1/-1 until end of turn for each desert we control. So this will, of course, nicely scale up with our game plan, and mostly should be able to take out pretty much any creature our opponent will throw at us. And then if we just need something to basically be tapped down, but we don't want to get rid of it because we maybe don't want to trigger off some of their abilities, we can utilize here Unquenchable Thirst. This is a 2-mana aura that also reads, when it enters, if we control a desert or if there's a desert card in the graveyard, we can tap down their creature, and of course it will not be able to untap until, of course, you get rid of the aura. In the 3-drop slot here, we'll have some pseudo card advantage here with Intimidation Campaign, Spelunking, and Garruk's Uprising. For Garruk's Uprising, this will be much more impactful once we start getting some stronger creatures added to the battlefield. As we, of course, play more of our Outcaster Greenblades and our Spinewood Armadillos, this, of course, will allow us to draw cards as long as they, of course, have a power of 4 or greater. And, of course, the nice bonus on top of that is it gives all of our creatures we control Trample. We also will utilize Spelunking here. If you've seen any of my other previous videos, I've talked about this card a ton of times, and I cannot stress enough, this is an amazing card, and this of course is essential to our deck, even if we don't play Caves. One more time for those of you who are not aware of how this card works, when it enters, you draw a card, and you get to put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. If it was a cave card, you gain 4 life, and of course lands we control will enter untapped, which is great to speed up our ramp package. We're also going to use a little bit of a nice little grindy piece here in Intimidation Campaign. If you're unaware of how this card works, we'll talk about it for just a moment. Intimidation Campaign is a 3-mana enchantment that reads, when this enchantment enters, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life and draw a card. Anytime you commit a crime, however, you may return the enchantment to its hand. In order to commit a crime, anything that targets our opponent or their graveyards or their creatures is considered basically a crime. And then finally, for the remainder of our ramp package, we'll utilize copies of Dance of the Tumbleweeds here, which can allow us to then use the spree mechanic. So if we want to, we can adjust it to pay for 1 to dig out a basic land or a desert card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, or pay an extra 3 and then get an XX green elemental creature token where X is the number of lands we control. And then finally, some copies of Map the Frontier here, a 4-mana sorcery that allows us to dig out 2 basic lands or desert cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then we can shuffle. As far as your mana base is concerned, this is definitely going to be a little bit different versus our other ones, even among the other 4-color land-based decks we've done, because this one will not utilize any basics at all, so keep that in mind as you play this deck. We'll use a copy of Imperial Rivulet, Infinite Dreadlands, Ramunap Ruins, and 2 copies of Hashop Oasis. Then we'll use a mix and match of various dual desert lands with Sour Springs here, Eroded Canyon, 2 Jagged Barrens, an entire set of Festering Gulch, an entire set of Bristling Backwoods, and an entire set of Lush Oasis, because again, we want to primarily hit our green sources as much as possible, and 2 Arid Archways here. While it may look a little bit even slower because these force us to bounce a land back to our hand, the Surveil ability can come in handy in a pinch, but once we get this down, having be able to tap 1 land for 2 is going to be great for us to make sure we can keep ramping and keep casting our spells. Now, if you're interested in taking this into best of 3, here's what I would recommend for you for the sideboard. For your graveyard hate, as always, Soul Guide Lantern's your catch-all. If you're looking for a little bit of a mix, because we do have a lot of high-powered creatures, we can use Decisive Denial to either use it as a fight mechanic, or you can utilize it as a counterspell in a pinch. We'll have Aetherize here. If your opponent gets really cheeky and likes to go wide with attacking, this will bounce back all of their attacking creatures to their hand. We'll utilize Destructive Revelry as your artifact and enchantment hate, and it also does a nice little bonus of 2 damage to their face. Choking Miasma will be our choice here to pump up one of our creatures if we hit the kicker ability, or at the very least, we'll give all of our creatures a -2/-2 until end of turn. If you want to deal with some of our opponent's annoying life gain, you can bring in Tibalt Rakish Instigator here, which will turn off an opponent's life gain and also help us create some devil tokens in a pinch. We'll also utilize Zendikar's Royal here if we need to go wide and just make a giant army of elemental tokens. This will trigger off with every land that we do hit. And finally, an extra copy of Spinewood Armadillo here in case we do need another big beater or at least something to discard to give yourself another desert and also gain some life to stabilize. In terms of strategy and tips I can give you for the deck, here's mostly what it comes down to. One of the biggest advantages that we have versus some of the other land-based strategies is deserts, as I mentioned earlier, can still apply pressure as they keep putting down more and more of those dual land deserts, because they will keep pinging your opponent, and again, hopefully you should be able to make the closing out the game a lot easier on you once you can start casting those Outcaster Greenblades, Spinewood Armadillos, and Spitfire Locks. If you have to, don't be afraid to then fetch out those Arid Archways that you have, and yes, that does seem a little counterproductive because once they come out, you have to bounce back another land, which of course means you have to put back into play another tap dual land, but if you manage to, of course, time it right, it shouldn't hurt you too much. Also, one of the cute little tricks that you can pull off with this deck is those single colored deserts, the Ramunap Ruins, Hashop Oasis, and Infinite Deadlands, you actually don't have to sacrifice those specific cards because those cards simply read you sacrifice a desert. You can sacrifice some of your other extra desert lands you don't need anymore to then hopefully close out the game, or at least use them as pseudo spot removal in certain times, depending on how the board state may look. Also, utilize your Unquenchable Thirst mostly for the early game threats, but for the late game threats, save those deserts too because they will become stronger and stronger as the game progresses. Your Intimidation campaign, while it may look a little clunky to only have 1 copy, that's really all you need as you keep putting out more and more of your desert duels, because this will keep bouncing it back with its ability, and of course, hopefully stabilize you as you keep grinding out your wins to keep drawing more cards. Of course, this does lead us to one of the biggest weaknesses of this deck, and it kind of falls in line with some of the other strategies that are land-based that are also on a budget that we've talked about in the past, and that is hyper aggressive decks like mono red aggro or sometimes mono white or Boros tokens can overrun you very quickly, and even more so with this deck versus say even the Gates or Caves deck. Unique to those packages, they have their own exclusive wraths. Unfortunately for deserts, we actually don't have an exclusive wrath, we only have exclusive spot removal. but this is where you're going to have to adjust yourself and kind of try to grind accordingly. You do have cards that you can utilize to chump block, and some cards, of course, will get stronger and stronger as the game progresses, like Outcast or Greenblade. You can sacrifice that Arboreal Grazer in the mid to late game when you don't need it anymore. Also, the biggest other major weakness of the deck is anything that involves life gain will make you very sad, because the whole point of our deck is to just slowly ping out some damage against our opponent with those deserts until you can get out one of your creatures that can hopefully just smash their way to victory for you. Now, if you do like this strategy in any way, shape, or form, as always, like our other previous decks, I will show you on screen right now a couple of snippets of previous decks that run in this style of gameplay. So if you are interested, and if you haven't already noticed, those links have been scattered throughout the course of this video, so click on one of those if you are interested in seeing what else deserts may do, or if you're interested in maybe a land-based / burn strategy. And with that all out of the way, here are my final thoughts that I want to give on the deck. Overall, when it comes to some of the land-based strategies we talked about, and I know I mentioned this over and over again in this video, I still firmly believe that deserts has the most potential to become even stronger than the other strategies as time goes on. Even though, as you saw today, it may not look like a very strong strategy, there is potential that this deck will only get stronger in the future, so long as Wizards provide some more support for us. I mean, the only real thing that we just need for this deck in the future is we just need desert basics. And if snow basics were a thing, then I only imagine that it's only a matter of time until we get to that point. But I would still say, if you are a fan of aggro strategies, if you're a fan of land-based strategies of ramping out, and if you're a fan of such a strategy that puts a nice little twist on things where you eventually can burn out your opponent and then get in a giant creature to surprise them with a one-hit KO, then I would definitely say, give this deck a try, and I assure you, when you manage to outgrind your opponent with a bunch of desert lands, you're going to have a lot of fun doing so. You'll be very surprised at how you can pull that off even on this budget, and when you manage to finish them off with a giant armadillo or burn them out with some lands and a lizard, you will definitely not be disappointed. That's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and just remember that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later.